Hi.
Good morning.
How are you?
Did you see the light coming on?
Yeah, I did.
And why do you ignore me?
Because I was trying
You were there, you did that?
on the meeting.
Morning, everybody. How are you doing? So we'll start out with a roll call. We'll get this meeting started here. We'll start out with a roll call.
Good morning. I'll say county or city, and then if you could just say your name into the microphone, please. Broward County,
Andres Condi.
Coconut Creek,
Mike Heimbach.
Cooper City, Coral Springs, Dania Beach, Davie,
Philip Holstein.
Deerfield Beach,
Leonel Lorenzo.
Fort Lauderdale, Hillsborough Beach, Hollywood, Lauderdale Lakes, Lauderdale by the Sea, Lauderhill, Lazy Lake, Lighthouse Point, Margate, Miramar,
Ralph Trapani.
North Lauderdale, Oakland Park, Parkland, Pembroke Park, Plantation, Sea Ranch Lakes, Southwest Ranches,
Russell Muniz.
Tamarack, West Park, Weston, Wilton Manors,
Alan Dodd.
and of course, Sunrise.
Mark Lebowski, Sunrise.
Thank you. I did not hear. Oh, he is. Okay.
No, Fort Lauderdale's never assigned anybody to the TAC. No. It's my understanding Fort Lauderdale never assigned anybody to TAC.
To the flag of the United States of America, to the republic which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, liberty and justice for all.
Public comment? Nope, none. Daniel Deitch from SES Engineers.
Thank you, Executive Director, Chair, Council, members of the TAC. Just a quick update. The master plan, as many of you may be aware, was presented to the Executive Committee and Governing Board in March. The the county raised some issues that have subsequently been addressed. Really, it fell into two main categories. One was the financial plan. There are a certain number of tons of material that may never go over a scale. So some examples where construction demolition debris is segregated and used as clean fill on construction projects. Also with large businesses like Publix and other grocers, they internalize sort of recycling where they may bring it back from an individual store back to a regional hub, and it will not cross a scale. So based on feedback from the county and analysis of the FDEB reports, the recycling reports, we took 10% off of the available tons that would be applicable for the tipping fee surcharge within the financial plan, and just literally took it off of consideration. We believe that there are some tactics that can be implemented in the future to capture that material, but for the purposes of determining or meeting the revenue sufficiency in the financial plan, that simply was taken away. The financial impact was literally just pennies, but it was still important that we not consider that as available revenue, at least in the short term. The second related to a potential misalignment between the SCS scope of work in the master plan and the requirements of the interlocal agreement. So we worked very closely with county attorney's office to draft language that is now incorporated into the master plan that identifies how each of the elements of the interlocal agreement are satisfied through the master plan. So based on that, another vote was taken by the executive committee at I don't think it was a special meeting, but a regularly scheduled meeting a little more than a week ago. And it was unanimously recommended to send the master plan to the governing board. It will be brought to the governing board on this Friday, with that recommendation from the executive committee for approval. In terms of timeline, you may be aware that the interlocal agreement requires that the facilities amendment be available to each of the ILA members for 120 days. And while the facilities amendment was accepted by the governing board to be sent to each ILA community, it was not sent, really because the facilities amendment and the master plan go hand in hand. So regardless of what happens with the master plan vote on Friday, the facilities amendment will be sent out to each ILA member on Friday, because there are 120 days between Friday and August 15th, which is the date in the interlocal agreement where that facilities amendment needs to be voted upon. So where we had a little bit of float in the schedule before, there's no longer any float. So we do know that facilities amendment will be transmitted on Friday.
Thank you, Daniel. The next one we're going to talk about would be sorry about that. I'm sorry. Member Trapani?
Good morning. I have just a quick question. If the master plan is not approved by the governing board, what's the use of selling the facilities amendment out? Because they're two fundamental conditions: approval of the master plan and adoption of the facilities amendment. The master plan, am I correct? If the master plan is not adopted, then what's the use of sending the facilities amendment out? Unless there's something else I'm not aware of.
Because we still need to send it out and start the 120-day clock running. So even if the master plan isn't adopted, we still have to send the facilities amendment out for that 120 days.
So possibly the master plan could be adopted at a later date?
Correct.
Correct.
Well, it wouldn't allow for the cities to have that full 120 days for the adoption of the facilities amendment. So it should go hand in hand, yes, but like I said, the clock is not on the master plan. The clock is on the facilities amendment.
Right, but theoretically, I get what you're saying. There's no specific timetable for the master plan, though they should be hand in hand. So it's either it can be later or it can't be later.
It shouldn't be later.
Philip Olstein, let me just ask a follow-up.
So obviously the municipalities have to approve and the county have to approve the facilities amendments. Do we also have to approve or adopt the master plan, or there's no vote that has to be taken on that by the municipality?
The municipality does not approve or disapprove the master plan, only the authority. But the facilities amendment is so closely tied to the master plan that theoretically, the cities are not going to be inclined to adopt a facilities amendment without having an approved master plan.
Great, thank you.
That answer your questions? Clear as mud. Any other questions before we move on? Okay, we'll move on to the commercial recycling program. And once again, we have Mr. Daniel Deitch up here from SES to discuss the recycling program, commercial recycling program.
Okay, so we have a presentation. We had intended to deliver it back in February. It was on the agenda. We did not get to present on it. It was sent out as part of the agenda package at that time. I believe it was sent out again. So you will see that the date reflects the meeting from 2 months ago. So along with the presentation, along with the backup information, was a fact sheet that sort of laid the predicate for what is in the presentation and what is in the draft ordinance. What I'd like to do, well, one, I want to make sure that everybody did receive that backup information, if not once, then twice. In terms of the fact sheet that has a lot of reference legislation from other municipalities or other counties. And also the draft ordinance itself. So I do want to point out in the draft ordinance, it identifies, we simply put on the sort of the window dressing of a county ordinance, but this is not just a county ordinance. This will be an ordinance that would be adopted by each ILA member, which includes the county. So please forgive the form, but the content is still every bit as valid. And what I'd like to walk through are sort of the contours of what a program may look like in the legislation. And there's a series of policy questions. And I recognize that this is not a policy body per se, and we don't have quorum anyway, but it's going to be incredibly valuable to get your feedback on key elements as we work through the refinement of the draft legislation. And I should also say that the implementation will follow once we have general consensus on the elements of the legislation. Then we will focus on implementation. We do know that there are practical challenges that each city will face in terms of where recycling containers will be placed and how that sort of interacts with current waste receptacles, and as it relates also to parking requirements. And this is something that other municipalities or jurisdictions have reasonably addressed. I just call that out as one of the considerations. Okay, Lisa, if you could please advance the slide. So much like with the master plan itself, we start with waste generation, or I should say waste composition. This was from the waste composition study that was conducted prior to beginning the master planning process. And as you can see, there's quite a bit of material that is not currently being recycled by the commercial sector. And we believe with the not so invisible hand of government, with gentle legislation, we can help businesses make different decisions, hopefully better decisions in terms of resource stewardship and managing components that are currently being disposed. Okay, next slide, please. So there is statutory sort of backup for managing this material, and this information should have also been included in the read ahead package, but it really comes in two different locations. One is the statutory authority in 403706 that includes the 75% recycling goal from the 2008 energy bill. and also 403-7046 that provides the authority to focus on commercial recycling and also how flow control interfaces with that. And to Mr. Trapani's point, one of the reasons of, one of the advantages of moving forward with the authority through the acceptance of the facilities amendment is that that would activate the flow control provision in the interlocal agreement. Next slide, please. So when we look to applicability, it isn't just what is going on around the country or around the world. It's where has this been done elsewhere in Florida, and there's a lot of great examples of where it has been done in Florida, where it's in place. So Lee County, the city of Orlando, both the city of Gainesville and Alachua County, and Collier County, and then closer to home within Broward County is the city of Hollywood. Each one has slightly different flavor of how heavy-handed it is, how flexible it is for the businesses. And what we have done is adapted what we think are the best practices from the existing legislation and applied it as part of the recommendations for the authority. Next slide, please. Also, our neighboring jurisdiction, Miami-Dade County, has a program. Again, they have their own flavor that works for them, and that has informed how we're going to approach it, or how we're recommending to approach it for the authority. So both in terms of what materials are designated with the clear performance standards for the businesses, there's an enforcement component with fines to encourage appropriate behavior. Also what I refer to as a habitual violator provision. And there's a balance. It isn't just, telling the businesses what to do. There's education materials, and that is contemplated as part of the master plan, as well as an assistance program from the county. Next slide, please. So in terms of how we align this with the authority, it has to tie into the interlocal agreement. That's really the enacting legislation. But there are decision points. One relates to are there thresholds for inclusion, and how much flexibility do we want to provide for individual businesses? So on the sort of moving forward consideration, we're looking at phased implementation. So there's a schedule that we developed. We developed it many months ago at the beginning of this. Obviously, we're going to have to adjust that for where we are today and what we can reasonably move forward with in the future. And I should also share that based on feedback from the executive committee, the belief is that this is an initiative that should survive beyond the master plan. In the event that the master plan or the authority does not survive beyond August, there is a belief that both this and construction and demolition debris, two initiatives that we'll be talking about today and tomorrow with the C&D subcommittee, that these are good, not just good practices, best practices for any county or municipality. So the notion is that they will continue beyond, but both the implementation and the enforcement will not, be absolute on day one. It really looks at a phased-in approach because there's a learning curve. This is a new initiative, and we want to make sure that people understand the why. But that goes along with the ask. And the other is how heavy-handed should it be in terms of dictating to businesses what they should be recycling. And what we've found is that a more reasonable approach is let the businesses identify one material that makes the most sense for them, because there's an economic component to this as well. So depending on the kind of business, we believe that they should have the flexibility to designate what material is most appropriate for them. And lastly, there should be recognition on the other side. So let's celebrate the businesses that are sort of changing their mindset to one of resource stewardship. And we want to make sure that they receive the appropriate recognition. We think that it's a market differentiator for them as a business if they are doing the right thing. Next slide, please. All right, so here comes the interactive portion of today's presentation. In terms of policy, do you agree that it's appropriate to let the business self-select what material they would like to recycle? And do you think it's appropriate to identify a single material or multiple materials?
If I may, yeah, I think it makes sense for the businesses to select. They know their industry, they know what they're dealing with, and certain businesses are gonna just, by nature of their business, are going to be handling certain types of materials a lot more frequently. But I would like to see maybe some tiering, because what I would be afraid of, and not that this is really gonna be 100% possible, but you don't want to just have only one type of thing recycled, right? So if you could somehow prioritize or create some type of tiering system so that certain recyclables are maybe more desired, or just so that there's a diversification of recyclable materials.
Yeah, and just thinking about it, one of the challenges is, like, for example, a bar. Well, they may generate more glass than any other recyclable material, but glass has very little to no value. So that's part of the consideration. On one hand, you may want to try to capture what it has the greatest volume or weight, but not if it has no value.
That's right on. I mean, if you want to sustain a program for the long term, you have to have value on what the commodities you're recycling. That's just recycling. You can recycle whatever you want, but if it has no value, then you can't sustain it. That's pretty much the model. That's where I stand, being a, sole hauler who provides the cans and picks it up and disposes it. So, okay.
I'll chime in, Mark Lebowski with Sunrise. So I think it's important to get feedback from the business community, but I think the ultimate decision should be the authority making the final determination of which materials are mandated or not.
Said, I mean, I think this group, needs to provide some input on that. I mean, for example, glass is not getting recycled in this community, so it's not, it's kind of ridiculous to include that. Some of those plastics have low value, like it was mentioned before. So, I mean, I think, as a group, we probably, should at least provide some feedback to the executive committee on, what should be included in those materials.
Just a quick suggestion. So though there are just a few of the MRFs and municipal recycling facilities here, all of the haulers here, Waste Pro, Waste Management, Republic, Coastal, they all own and operate MRFs, whether it's here in South Florida or elsewhere. Why not get those people in? Let's sit down, tell them that, hey, identify the 10 most valuable materials there are. Those are the materials we go after, whether it's commercial and or residential. And then we can go and say, all right, this is a great idea. These are the 10 we're going to limit. Everything goes on with the solid waste authority, and or if not, since it's a county ordinance, not a solid waste authority ordinance. And then we can move forward with that. Identify the most most valuable products at that time. So then we can educate everybody, say, hey, these are the top 10 items you should be putting in your carts. Let's move forward with that. These will help, quote unquote, maybe fund or at least bring down the processing costs if there's less contamination. And again, that's just a recommendation.
And a great recommendation. So much like tomorrow, there'll be an industry. There's going to be a roundtable. It's not just industry; it's open to the world. But that's exactly what we plan to do. But first, we want to gauge the feedback from this body so that we're more informed, or we're feeling stronger about the authority's position on what should be included, where the flexibility should be. But that's exactly what we plan to do. Thank you for teeing that up. Okay, so
Go ahead.
just in terms of general consensus, do you think it's appropriate to allow the businesses to self-identify, if this, let's assume that the ordinance advances, leave it to the business to identify one material for inclusion in such a mandatory program?
Are you saying just that they can only choose one, or they can, or
They can
have to
choose as
at
many
least
as they
one?
want, but in terms of the minimal level to achieve compliance, I would suggest starting with one. You can always increase it in the future, but why start more aggressive and then have to sort of take your foot off the gas?
Mr. Trapani?
Yeah, I get it. If it's a business and they only produce a cardboard, primarily. One of the things maybe along that way is in the ordinance, you recommend anybody or everybody recycle that has a 70-gallon cart or greater for their solid waste service.
Mhm.
I don't know of any city that has anything smaller than a 96-gallon for a commercial cart service. So that pretty much means everybody, with the exception of spatial or, would have to recycle. I think that limit, that is a little too small. We should probably reconsider that maybe at the industry forum. The haulers say, listen, anything smaller than 70 gallons, it's just, you're running into, again, everybody would have to get, a cart under these rules. And according to the schedule, you want to do a soft launch in about 4, 5, 6 months. So then you need to think about all those additional carts, all the additional dumpsters, all the additional collection containers and drivers that you're going to be needing for not just one company, but all the companies are going to need. So, the soft launch is probably pie in the sky stuff. But these are some of just going back to the 1.70-gallon cart, I think it's just way too small. Probably more likely maybe a 2 cubic yard cart or smaller is exempt. And then anything from 2 cubic yards above, depending on the business type, because surely, a barber shop, for example, or a hair salon is not going to produce a lot of recyclables. Plus their garbage is not going to be a lot anyway, right? People come in and then they leave. So then maybe we need to look at that kind of thing as well. But again, just getting back to the maybe 2 cubic yards or smaller or exempt.
Yep. And again, great point. And I think just to state the obvious, right, for a business that's generating waste, we're talking about volume. It's on the commercial side, right? So whatever the volume size container times the number of days collected, what we're talking about is segregating the recycling portion from that, but the total volume of service remains the same. So I absolutely agree that there should be a minimum threshold because it simply doesn't make sense to have it be less.
I just wanted to ask about from the code enforcement side, if someone can only choose one out of the 7 or whatever the other categories, how do you mandate or how do you enforce it from a code enforcement perspective? And then how does recovered materials play a role as well? Are we foreseeing that basically this isn't covered under the franchise agreement of our collection agreements and they can utilize whoever they want, or some of these may fall under the recovered materials? How do you see that playing out?
Yeah.
I guess with the code enforcement side.
And I appreciate you sort of leaning into that because it's the practical consideration. We can talk about how it's addressed in other jurisdictions, but each ILA member is somewhat unique in how they manage commercial collection and recyclable within that. Generally, it's outside of a franchise, but we've got to, when we get to the implementation phase, or sort of blocking out what the implementation looks like, we're going to have to look at each member what their current agreement is and what is allowable, and sort of provide the contours of what implementation looks like for each member.
One more thing maybe it's come up before, but textile recycling, has that really been, maybe it's on the commercial side, maybe that's more on the residential, but has that really been discussed at all?
Well, yes, and a great suggestion. It is outside of what are the typical or the recyclable materials that are identified in Florida statute.
Okay.
They can be made.
And I just bring it up because interestingly enough, the town of Davie has a franchise for textile recycling. We have about 30 or 40 containers throughout the town, and we actually make revenue off of it, about $70,000 a year. And in terms of poundage or tons that have been recycled, reused, it's about 500 tons a year, just for example.
Yeah,
so
it makes a difference.
I was just gonna add that for minimum standards, we kind of
usually go with a 96 gallon
Mhm.
for every 4 cubic yard of recycling to kind of balance, because what's going to happen when you implement this is they're going to do away with the solid waste altogether, because it's mandatory to have recycling. So at least if we have a 96 gallon for solid waste, they could go up to 4. They go to 8 cubic yards, then we go to a 1 yard or a 2 yard for solid waste. It's kind of what I've seen over the last 30 years out here. So
Thank you for that.
Yeah, I just wanted to ask for clarification on one thing. In the ordinance, you talk about, again, since this is a county ordinance, we need to having someone register with the county as a recovered material hauler. Miramar has it. I'm sure everybody else has it because it's different from the franchise. Would that permit cover that hauler countywide or just unincorporated areas?
It's a good question. I don't know the answer. Gets into implementation.
well, the hard part of it, that some are open market. So, and some aren't.
Sure.
So that's it. As I think historically it's been, every city does their own. If this becomes county, could fall on one, but
And we need a legal opinion on that because we're going to fight. We'll fight it, obviously. We'll be like, no, only we want our, not that we want X, only 3 or 2 or 1 company doing it. We want to make sure that they're registered. If there should be something, we know who's doing that work. So
Noted. Next slide, please.
Before you go, Daniel, just on Bill's question about code enforcement, is this more of a, do you see other areas enforcement by, is it more financial incentive to participate? And there's that recycling saves them money in terms of their having a smaller solid waste dumpster, or is there actual hard violations that you see for non-participation?
Again, it's a policy matter.
Or
So
is it
it's
what?
going to rest with the executive committee and governing board. But my belief is don't pass a law that you're not going to assure compliance for. So, right, where did we start with this? That there was an understanding that there was an opportunity to engage the commercial waste generating community, recycling community, to play their part. And let's capture that material and get it beneficially used.
Phil? Oh, sorry, Carol.
I'll trade with you, but I think the question that just came up raises an interesting point, which is, as we all know, recycling is not without cost. And currently, I think most cities kind of roll it into a solid waste fee in one form or another. I know on our residential side, we do differentiate, but it does have a cost. So now, as we talk about expanding recycling more into the commercial sector, are we going to see adjustments in those solid waste rates? Again, you're going to see a minimization of people with solid waste containers. So you're going to have to balance it to cover the recycling cost. But there are some cities, and mine is one, it says in my code, everyone must have solid waste. And I get a lot of pushback now from mom and pop companies that they don't generate solid waste. And I, of course, get to stand firm and tell them they're going to have a minimum collection service. But that's going to be a factor for, I think, a few of us anyway.
Phil?
No, I just wanted to add on the mandated commercial recycling is now if we, in theory, we at some point the authority has to decide if cost is a factor or not, because again, you see a lot of municipalities that go all in on solid waste and recycling, and they don't necessarily concern themselves with the cost. Now, I don't know where we're going to end up on that, but saying that, for example, if you have a business that produces a lot of material and they just pick one of these 7 and say, oh, as long as they're doing one of the 7, they're good to go. I don't think it's the way to go. I think it should be all or nothing in terms of the commercial recycling. Because then if from a code enforcement perspective, are you going to have a database to know, well, that, we have 4,000 to 5,000 businesses in Davie. So we're going to say, well, this business we know is doing paper, so they're okay. We're going to ignore the other 6 here. So I don't even know how you'd even keep track of that, to be quite honest. I'm sure there's a way, but it seems a little bit crazy if our goal is to really push recycling. It should be all of it, not just one thing from this list. So I guess that's just my perspective sitting here. And again, I got cost as a factor because it's the same thing with Davie. Right now, we don't do residential recycling. So if we bring it back, we're willing to bear the cost, and we have to ask ourselves, the environmental benefits the bigger question or the cost? So that's my feedback.
I'm just going to jump in real quick. That all falls back into the public education piece, which is, recycling's always been I'm going to say a feel good kind of thing. And I'm old enough. I remember when we started recycling in this state and we all thought it was going to be a financial boon and, it was going to pay for our garbage collection. And sadly, we all know otherwise. The other thing is, as we talk about prioritizing materials, we also know that the market is constantly shifting. Mm-hmm. And what has value today is not necessarily what has great value tomorrow.
Member Humbert?
Yeah, I'm just going to say mandated enforced ordinances, right, will drive competition, right? So if you're out there enforcing the ordinance and then the competition is going to follow up and it will drive those prices down. So I know really right now, since, recycling is very voluntary and a lot of the companies that do it have a lot of material. So we don't know what those costs are going to be. So it's really very early. So to be concerned about the cost, I would say if you have an ordinance and you enforce it, it will drive competition.
They had a question earlier. Did it answer?
I was just going to agree with Carol that if you don't have all, or Phil, if you don't have all, and we keep changing it over time, they just lose interest when you keep adding, take away glass today, add glass tomorrow. It's better off just have all single street. I would eliminate yard waste. I don't know why yard waste is up there, but because then it becomes contamination. Are we looking for that too? So the business said we're doing cardboard, but now they got glass and the glass is contaminating the cardboard.
This might be a little early to ask, but that's usually the first thing I look at when it comes to recycling and processing is, do we have a place where this is going to be taken, where it's going to have the right commodity pricing? Because you got to have an end, you got to have a final destination before you could pick what you want. I don't know.
Yeah, there is ample capacity for processing recyclable materials within Broward County.
And this would fall under the RFPs that the SWA is intending to do at some point, correct?
Correct.
Thank you. For me, the only problem is how far am I have to take it?
Question and just following up on what Carol said, that some businesses are going to claim that they do not generate waste.
Yep.
So right now, the Director of Public Works has the authority to waive the requirement of not having a can there. Who would have that authority, the Solid Waste Authority or the municipality?
It's a great question. My belief, and I'm not the decision maker, but it should rest with each municipality. Because what we're trying to do is create the connection between the authority as the centralized agency, but working with all of its member communities. But I won't get political. I believe that the individual municipalities or the ILA members know best sort of where the rubber meets the road. And that's why we're having this conversation now, to make sure that whatever legislation is drafted is reflecting sort of the nuts and bolts, the practical elements of implementing and overseeing this kind of program.
Just a quick question. In the master plan, in table 11, we spoke about this very, very, very briefly. There's under the strategies and such and things like that, there's a line item there that says the solid waste authority will break the county into recycling quadrants, not just the other collection quadrants. But for is that still on the table?
No, I mean, so ideally, and again, collection is going to remain the responsibility of each ILA member. At some point in the future, if it is a policy decision to change that approach where the authority becomes responsible for collection, sets up franchise zones, that decision will be made in the future. That is not contemplated at this time.
But this is why it's important to differentiate between the county permit and the municipal permits. Because again, if it's permitted by the county and they're going to be coming into Miramar and I can't say, oh, okay, you guys are authorized to pick up recyclables, going back to code enforcement, who's enforcing it? Because then I might be losing solid waste services, which are a requirement for our business tax receipt. So if we're not going to do that, I know it's very late in the game, then the things that are not included should be pulled out, honestly, of the master plan. Saying, oh, in 30 years, we might want to do something like that. Yeah, but we're talking about now and implementing now. In 30 years, we can maybe add it as a save on or something like that. But for it to still be there, that the solid waste authority will even still consider breaking Broward County into quadrants for collecting recyclables. And it still talks about doing collections as well, which you pointed out. Those are some of the things that should be noted and removed if we're not going to do them right now.
Ambria?
I have a question with regards to the recycling. Can't we just do an all or nothing, like it was Davey, apologies. Davey said just have an all or nothing and then have a separate list, which is the one that would change with regards to the value of each recyclable. So they're all still there. Everyone still has the list of all that they need to recycle. And then they'll have a list to know what is of more value than the others, because that's what would change. The list of what is needed to be recycled won't. Just the value of each item would change through time.
Again, I mean, fair point. Ultimately, it's policy direction, how the authority wants to proceed. It could be you have to recycle all these materials, or it could be the business self-selects a material or multiple materials. Right, some businesses may want to just recycle cardboard, right? That they can, and that ends up being a bypass material when it goes to a recovery facility. So there's lots of ways to skin it. What we're recommending is starting gently and progressively fine tuning the legislation, not shooting for perfection, right? Or the ultimate end goal, but start incrementally, because this is a pretty significant change that we're talking about.
Well, okay, so yes, they could start that way, but eventually what we want is for them not to continue to just selectively choose one. If you're starting with one, then eventually we would like you to recycle everything that's on the list that you produce. We don't want you to pick, choose, and refuse.
Correct.
We'd like you to start with one, yes, but over time, over a period of time, whether it's a designated period of time or not, we would like you to recycle everything as much as possible from the list that you generate.
Correct. So what we're talking about is setting a minimum for compliance, and we'll get into exemptions and exceptions and the like in some subsequent slides. But we're not talking about prohibiting a business from maximizing their recycling. What we're saying is businesses have to recycle at a minimum one material. And again, with recognition, you can celebrate those that choose out of the gate to recycle, to optimize or maximize their recycling.
Just a quick example, like if you own a warehouse and you're shipping stuff every day and got mostly cardboard, you don't want, you got an employee come in, has a, can of Coke for lunch. You don't want to force them to recycle that aluminum can, right? So, right. So, yeah, I mean, but, there's, you don't want to focus on the low volumes if someone's got a tremendous amount of one item.
No, what I meant was, if they have a lot of cardboard and a lot of glass that they're not choosing just to recycle the cardboard and not the glass, that kind of thing. Just if obviously there's a certain minimum.
So minimum volumes.
A minimum volume, of course, minimum volume, yes. I mean, we're not saying every single solitary aluminum can has to go. But if you're generating a minimum volume, yes, you should be encouraged to recycle that particular item and not just choose one. And yes, I know it's a slow, a soft start. Pick one now, but I feel like if you're picking one now, then there should be some sort of timeline where you slowly and gradually progress to be able to recycle all the other materials you produce.
Hey, good morning. This is Travis Barnes. I work with the SES team with Resource Recycling Systems. So just a little clarification on like the market conditions for the commodities. Most businesses are going to have two options when they go to try to recycle, unless they generate a tremendous amount of waste and they do business-to-business recycling. Typically, they're going to get a cardboard-only recycling container, or they'll get the commingled single stream. And so the fluctuations month to month on the commodity value doesn't really impact that business as much as it does the waste processors that are actually the MRFs that are recovering it and shipping it to market. So by providing that option to only have one, it gives the ability to have just cardboard only recycling like many businesses currently do, with the hope that if they do commingled, they will be targeting the majority of the others that you put curbside. So it really provides for businesses to continue to recycle cardboard like they are currently doing, or to start with cardboard with the hopes that they also have single stream down the road, which would include the cardboard with everything else. But the fluctuations in the market doesn't really impact that business. If you're, say, Publix, where you're bringing a lot of that material back to your own operations, you're baling your own cardboard, they're actually selling it themselves and making revenue. Businesses that generate a whole lot of waste, they're going to be looking to do that to target normally only cardboard or some of the metals or a plastic that maybe they can't recycle, like a lot of shrink wrap or something that they take to another end user. But that's typically not picked up directly from a curbside hauler. It's another business to business type interaction. But again, I think that the key is with that one, giving them one material to pick, you're basically saying you can do cardboard only like you have been doing, or get your foot in the door by starting to do cardboard. If you do the others, most likely to always be single stream and include the rest of the materials.
Yeah, I think it's sage advice to start out with one, designating that every city, every commercial entity has to have at least one. Right now, they don't have to recycle anything, right? So mandating that they have to have at least one, I think, is a good way to start the program. And then maybe have something implemented in the ordinance, the county ordinance or otherwise, or each municipalities, that there's like a 5-year window where we review that. And any business that's been operating now, okay, so now you've got to go and have 2 or 3 or whatever, or what have you. But to start off the program, any new program, you're going to have people resisting it. So why make it very difficult and say you have to recycle all of them? Designating one, I think, is a good solution.
What was that at the end? One or more?
I'm saying one to begin with. I support Daniel's suggestion of designating at least one, and then in the resolution, or the ordinance, I should say, have some kind of threshold period, a couple years in, 2 years in, whatever the case is, that they have to designate more at that point.
No, I get it. It's, of course, mandating is going to be very difficult. And again, until we figure out what size as well. There was something was just touched on that you talked about before, where materials not being captured on the scales, right? So if someone has a baler and they're baling their own cardboard, for example, pretty much those are the big box stores anyway, that's not getting picked up. So those are just another example of materials that aren't crossing the scales for everybody to recognize when that was brought up before. And it was actually really good point. The other thing was the commodity market. And this is why I tend to lean towards it should be whatever items you have that are recyclable should be put in. There is a cost because of the up and down of the market, of the commodity markets. and everything that's going on. And that does impact the customer because then the rates are going to change. If it was just one item and there was only a truck picking up only cardboard, then that service is going to be less than a truck that picks up all different multiple kinds of materials, because then there's more of an associated processing cost. That's how it relates back to the cost for the customer. So I get it, but the truck picking up all the recyclables is not going to just pick up cardboard. And then one truck is not just going to pick up plastics 1 through 7. So it's going to be mixed anyway. You might as well get as much as you can and capture as much of that market as you can.
Okay. If we could advance to the next slide, please. Just because there are other categories that may be covered in this proposed ordinance. One is temporary events. And the reason for that is what we're talking about through the master plan is changing behavior. And one of the ways that you do that, and I would imagine every ILA member has a lot of temporary events, special events, where you can send the signal. And I'm not sure if you're currently recycling or require recycling at those events, but it is a way that municipal governments can lead by example and require it of their vendors. It becomes very public, noticeable to the community members that are participating, and we find that this is it's an appropriate connection within mandatory commercial recycling legislative framework. Maybe let me ask the question of the group. Is recycling required at your special events currently? Would y'all like it to be? Or is that more of a burden without the payoff?
Right. I mean,
I'm sorry.
no,
Just-
go ahead.
But just keep in mind that at least in the county ordinance definitions, temporary events also take into consideration like event halls. And you have places that, their business is just having temporary events. So certainly it makes sense to me that you would have or require them to have a recycling program. So maybe not your 1-day carnival, because I understand, that's an issue. But if you have multi-day carnivals, or you have the same carnival organizers that come every year for the same carnivals, they certainly you certainly can require them to have a monitor, if you will, by the recycling containers. We've had that at a very small event that we had recently. We had student volunteers that assisted with that, and they were very successful in diverting waste into the regular solid waste containers and into the recycling containers. So it can be done. It just has to be a commitment to do it.
Right, just to kind of piggyback that. I mean, Daniel, Trevor, this is the hardest recycling that exists. So, to mandate that now is not a good idea, right? The authority should really be out educating, doing some examples and things like that, and not mandating that now. It is hard. I've probably done more events than anybody here. Some have been in complete failures, others have been success. But it takes staff time, it takes coordination, it takes a lot of effort. It's a whole second event, actually. So I think mandating it now is probably very premature.
Good morning. I would agree that, well, first of all, mandating anything is always difficult, right? Nobody wants to be told what to do. Second of all, you're getting into our agreements in the recycling ordinance. It says in all of our agreements, whether it's with our own events and or a sponsor of an event or somebody hosting an event, has to be in there. So now we have to add that additional language into our agreements and contracts. Second of all, like Russell said, he was lucky enough to have student volunteers there. Well, then you need somebody to monitor what's going on. And again, is it the Solid Waste Authority, the city, or the Broward County going to monitor this and what's going on? So there's all these little things, everything with the garbage is a step. You start with A, it leads to B, it leads to C, all the way to Z. Everything needs to be talked about and discussed. And some of the things we have not talked in detail about to really understand what or how it actually works. What are the things that are the mechanisms to make this work the way we want it to? Again, one of the things, again, just quickly on this, one is you're getting into our contracts, which nobody likes. And two is who's going to pay for the monitoring and the staffing and all that kind of stuff? Is it on the city, the solid waste authority? Is Broward County? Is Andres going to be out there and Natasha and Steve? Are they going to be the ones watching the carts and make sure everything's being done? These are the type of the things that we really need the details on for it to be successful, and we don't have those.
Quick example. For example, the enforcement part of it moving forward. Give you an example of the airport and the port. Huge. They have recycling containers everywhere. Does anybody know where it goes? Is it going to a recycling facility, or is it always because when the hauler picks it up, says this load's contaminated and it has to go to the landfill, waste energy somewhere for MSW processing? So everything's in place, but it's the final numbers at the end that it's not making it there. How do you fix that? That's really where it needs to be fixed. Excuse me.
Fair point. But my belief, any contract that you have, it isn't enough to have that legal framework. There are responsibilities of the service provider, and there's responsibility of each, the other side of the contract, the municipality or the ILA member. And I think that it's unreasonable to think that a service provider will always do the right thing. They don't feel like they're being watched and monitored and being held accountable for what they've committed to. Yeah. Understood. Yeah, we recognize we're shaking the ground that we stand on.
This just kind of goes all hand in hand with a question that I raised before on the C&D recycling ordinance, which is at some point, and we're really getting to the point where those decisions and that conversation has to take place now, as representatives of municipalities and of course the county, we need to all understand what our responsibilities are. Who's managing it, who's enforcing it, who's providing the enforcement mechanisms. And that's all been kind of left sort of nebulous. But we really need to nail down those details so that, again, we as municipalities are conducting ourselves in the appropriate manner. The county knows what its responsibilities are going to be, because if we roll this out half-baked, it's just going to blow back on everybody and not in a good way.
And I think what Daniel's saying is to go in small steps at first and count our successes and then take another step. Now, there's all different types of level of participation when we start talking about temporary events and so forth. I think each of us as representing a city can implement something internally first to show that it can be successful and run on city events. And to what level that is, you can start very slowly with that by simply just having recycling containers. And then it's amending contracts, making sure that your vendors are complying. And then once you get yourself up and running and show the community that you can do it as a city, that we're taking that lead and setting that bar and setting that standard. So I agree with how we're proceeding with this. And I think as a city, we don't have to wait for a mandatory recycling ordinance to start that process internally.
Don't disagree, but I will tell you from experience that we've seen in our city, to just put out recycling containers at an event and not have monitors there, not have an education campaign going on at the same time, doesn't work. You get nothing but contaminated garbage. But again, looking at the bigger picture, again, as we talk about commercial recycling and we talk about C&D recycling, and we start to talk about getting these larger facilities involved and larger organizations, you know, the little stuff within our doors, I agree, we can take those steps and we can start to move those things forward. But those bigger pieces, I think we all have to understand how the puzzle fits together. And I don't think we're there yet.
And I think it's all part of the authority with a big part of our funding is for education, right? And that is the next logical step. And the education crosses all boundaries of everything we're talking about, whether it's CD or regular
But again,
recycling.
now we have a building coming down and we want commercial C&D recycling done. Who's administering that program? Is it the county or is it the city? Is it the city subject to the county's recommendations? If the processor isn't behaving properly, who's notifying the violation? Who's doing the enforcement? Who's providing the special magistrate? You've got the same thing on the commercial recycling side, especially when you talk about larger businesses or multifamily communities. If we just want to start, with some voluntary stuff, I think that's great. But I think that as we start to move forward ordinances, and we've got time schedules on our agenda for when these ordinances are going to move forward. First of all, I think the time schedules are ridiculous. There's no way we're going to meet most of them. But we need to get all of the pieces of the puzzle on the table so we all know what we're dealing with and we're all holding up our end of the bargain.
So completely agree. So in terms of the schedule, a virtuoso of the schedule, that this was set months ago with best intention, because there was a desire to drive this forward. People want to see progress, and the schedule really, set the pace. But we can go back to the first slide, February 13th was when we're scheduled to present and start this conversation. We're already 2 months behind schedule. To the larger point, we want to make sure that we understand what the contours are, which is why we're having the conversation that we're having, because implementation is critically important, but we don't want to spin our wheels thinking about all the what ifs. Let's have a conversation and try to narrow the focus so that we can give you concrete elements to consider.
Then maybe we need to parcel this out onto smaller pieces. Maybe we want to talk about voluntary initiatives that cities should be undertaking at this point in time, maybe reinforced or supported by education, and then look at a phasing program for moving into some of these other areas, because the ordinances as they're written are pretty expansive, but they're, I'm going to say, lacking in implementation details. I guess that's really what I'm getting
in terms of how the puzzle fits together, my expectation is that the tenor and some of the details of the discussion today will be advanced tomorrow. Granted, there's a C&D and mandatory commercial recycling subcommittee tomorrow. There's a roundtable, so that's going to be the majority of the focus. But I would like to think that sort of the feedback from the meeting today will be shared with that subcommittee, because that is a special subcommittee to the executive committee. You may be aware the executive committee that was scheduled for Friday is not going to be held for a variety of reasons. It'll just be a governing board. But I do expect this feedback to be given to the executive committee, because they're the ones that are really driving this. We want to maintain the pace and meet their expectations. But what I'm hearing is we've got to be thoughtful and methodical and move forward in a way. Maybe we don't get to mandatory as that first step. There are things that all of the municipalities, all the ILA members can do with, currently, and maybe that is the precursor, lead by example of what you're currently doing and what you can commit to doing before asking it of the commercial sector.
Member Morris, to your point, I know that we were on a schedule to get this thing done, by a certain date, but we'd rather get it right than get it done, quickly and before it's ready to go, really. Yes. Okay.
So what I'm hearing, and to your point about venues that host these sorts of events, that's what's contemplated with the venue facility, whether it is music halls or other spaces for events, private events, public events. And then of course, multifamily it's a third rail, but they are very much a part of it. And we want to make sure that recycling is available for multifamily facilities. All right. So there are some other matters that we'd like to discuss with you. Elisa, if you could please advance to the next slide. So it relates to exemption, self-hauling, progressive enforcement appeals and fees. And if we could move to the next slide, please, where we'll talk about exemptions. And this sort of speaks to the point, what if you're already receiving the lowest level of solid waste service? That doesn't make sense. So the way that that's been mitigated in other jurisdictions is allowing somebody either to get a waiver out of the program or to self-haul. So the material is still being recycled, but what we hope is that folks don't freeload on the residential system, but we know that that happens, but rather have them go to a recycling center or drop-off center themselves.
I would just, I don't know if it would be this one or the next one, but I would definitely recommend we do not permit self-hauling. Because that just opens up a whole nother can of worms. So that's definitely a no-go.
So how do you handle the Publixes of the world and the other good corporate partners that are doing self-hauling right now? How do you account for that?
Well,
If you don't
because,
allow it.
I mean, you want to answer or? I'm just saying generally you don't want self-hauling because then I'm gonna hire Andres' trucking company to come to my business and get rid of something, right? And then what if there's hazardous waste product in there? We don't know, right? If I'm self-hauling and I don't feel like driving to the facility, and in my opinion, self-hauling is gonna lead to more. One is more illegal dumping. Two is we're not gonna know it's going to the right place. And three is who the heck is gonna be checking all that stuff? You know, again, it just opens up a whole can of worms in which we're not ready for.
Yeah, and the
And
self-hauling.
I'm sorry, and would they be required to register as a self-hauler? And then you get into us, does that person have, if they're driving a big truck, a CDL? The insurance for the company now that they're self-hauling.
And I think the self-hauling is more for the smaller businesses of what you were saying earlier, barbershop, a nail salon of self-hauling their own trash. The Publix is, somebody's picking up the bales of cardboard. It's not, the Publix isn't hauling it themselves. The Walmarts and Publixes, they have people to come get the expired meats and all of that. Still a hauling company,
Right.
just not your traditional, maybe Waste Management, Republic company. I think the self-hauling is more, I have a small business, I have a small car dealership, I'm just gonna take all my garbage home with me. Because I produce a little Publix bag of garbage.
Yeah, I think I understand the concern by member Trapani and member Conde about the self-hauling, but from what I read in the ordinance, my understanding is, first of all, the small generators are exempt anyway. That's one.
Yeah.
Two, the larger ones, like the Publix is and some of these others, by having somebody haul it for them, that's essentially self-hauling, right?
Yeah.
That's the way I understood it.
Correct.
So they would be in compliance with that. Now what you're talking about is the more medium-sized companies. What I also read, if we modeled it out, on the county's ordinance, is that essentially those companies would have to be registered. They would have to be, they'd have to have all the certifications. They'd have to have their load tickets and everything else, or their disposal tickets. All of that stuff would have to be kept so that it can be checked. Clearly, everything can be manipulated. I get it, but I think that you need to create some kind of exemption for self-hauling.
Yeah, so
allowance for self-hauling.
yeah, so we're conflating really two subject matters. One is exemptions and the next. So Elisa, thank you for advancing the self-hauling just so that we can address that. But the idea is, should somebody be exempted from the program and on what basis, which is distinct and separate from self-hauling, which may be a subset of that because that may be an exemption criteria, but not an exemption in its totality.
Yeah, and then just staying with that, listen, I understand there's going to be exemptions. There's no issue. Again, whether it's a financial burden, I mean, that could be up to, interpretation as a financial burden, right? Space for sure, and the container size again, but who makes that decision? Is it the county, the solid waste authority, or the city?
So I'm going to answer it a couple different ways. In terms of who sets that policy direction, it would be informed by this committee, but ultimately it would be the authority, but the legislation would be passed by all ILA members. So that includes the county and each municipality within.
But operationally, if the county's going to adopt an ordinance, and in theory, each of the cities is adopting a mirror ordinance that we're responsible for administering, that we are administering through our code enforcement system and all of those pieces. There's a lot of education there that needs to be done by the city to get its staff ready to roll this out and make this happen. At some point, we've got to, we being the SWA or the county, somebody's got to come out and say, this is how the process is going to work. This is the piece the county is going to administer. This is the piece that the cities are going to be responsible for administering, so that we can go forward and actually make this happen. But we got to clarify who's on first. And we still don't know.
We need to have that all figured out. I'm sorry, go ahead. Oh, yeah, sorry about that. So yes, we agree. Then that's what we're having these meetings for, is to come up with what we're going to be doing and which way to go with it. Correct, Daniel? Yeah.
Correct.
And that's,
Maybe guidance for most people as to how this comes together.
And to your point, that's
think from the,
we would prefer to set an audacious goal and work deliberately towards it, recognizing that it may be in phases. But yes, we understand that you need to know, how does this get implemented and what is the impact to each ILA member? We wanted to understand the contours of what would be included and the like, before we move into the implementation phase, because there are plenty of conflicts in some unique characteristics of individual ILA members, and while we want this to be applicable to all, we have to be sensitive to those unique circumstances. So we believe that this is the right committee to start the conversation at, because you understand the day-to-day operations within each of your respective communities. No disrespect to the elected officials, but as you state, they're a policy body. They should not necessarily be concerned, but for your input on the day-to-day operations, so that it informs better policy direction. It's my humble view.
but we do believe that this is going to be, by each municipality is going to be having to be doing enforcement. I mean, it can't be from, the county can't enforce everybody in this, and because the counties used to say we don't have enough staff to enforce every violation in every municipality.
Respectfully, I think you're going to hear a similar thing from some of the cities, that they don't have adequate code enforcement staff to be able to enforce this. And many of us may be needing to look at staffing up, and code can be a difficult position to staff. And again, that's all fine. We all understand that somebody has to do this, but as a municipal rep, I need to be able to answer questions to my CAO and my mayor and my council members as to how this is going to work and who's on first and who's responsible for what. And we've hit the point where we need to start, in my opinion anyway, to layer those pieces in.
We agree. We're now at that point, as we get feedback, that we can start to dial in what implementation looks like. We didn't want to get ahead of ourselves and start to deal with potential ghosts, things that we think that we see in our peripheral vision. We really need the feedback from you in terms of what the, you know, the practical considerations are so that we can address those head on rather than a shotgun approach. That makes sense. Okay.
I mean, right now, do we have any feedback from people here? I know you said that people may not be in position, but there may be some people that at least have input on which way you think it should go.
And just the way it used to be done in the past was a 4 or 5 employee flow control team. They would gather all the information, the violations, send it to the individual city. The individual city would then enforce whatever ordinance was in their city, because every city was different. So the county had a 4 or 5 team, supervisor, director for flow control, a whole department would go. All full-time employees would go out, find violations. Let's say a violation in Plantation, I would send an email with pictures to Carol. She would be down. Their team would be responsible to go enforce the violation. That's a whole program, a whole team. And that was for solid waste. Now we're talking about adding recycling.
Recycling
Right.
element, right?
It's a whole nother subject, right?
Yeah, I know that most cities, if you have exclusives on your franchise agreement, the code enforcement department, or they may have the sustainability department or solid waste department would typically go out and let people know that you can't, you know, we have an exclusive. You can't have other vendors in here hauling for you if you have an exclusive. So it depends on each city really how they handle it.
The information, the opportunity, educate our teams so that we're ready to do it. You want to roll it out at a point where you have, I'm going to say, your frontline staff in a position to, when they're dealing with a violation, communicate with the party. Problem is, and what they need to do to correct it. Again, part of that's a staff education function, and you know, there's a lot of us around the table.
Yep. So I mean, I think it's appropriate that the authority play that central role in orchestrating all of those activities, right? Because one of the tenets of the master plan is that consistency or harmonization of services, which are both customer facing as well as ILA member facing.
Right, and that's why we're still tweaking the ordinance also to get it right.
Yeah, and again, different people have different approaches. Some people like to start with a clean sheet of paper. Other people like to see which is the approach that we've taken. What we think are the best practices that are applicable for the authority, and let's get a reaction to that. So that's where we're at. We're seeking your feedback. We're taking notes on your feedback, and we will be adjusting our approach based on your feedback.
Okay, Daniel. Oh, it's okay.
Thank you. Yeah, again, this is, I'm going to try to give maybe a little something on how this all builds on each other, right? So what if we're all members, but then you have Pompano Beach, you have Pines, you have, Dania Beach, who are not part of it. Are they required to do this?
Hallandale.
You know, yes or no, Hallandale, right, whatever. So whether we are or not, how do we implement this on non-members? Can we even do that? Again, that's a legal thing. But how that works is, say we do it, right? We're all part of it. Like Carol said, hey, now we need a code monitor, right? Let's just call it a code monitor, implement not just this, but all the other things, the C&D and all the other requirements we're going to have. Well, that right there is not a cost that's going to impact the resident so much or the commercial business directly, but it's going to cost them because the city has to know and now has to go and hire additional staff to do this. So that's a hidden cost, right? And then there's some cities, and I'm glad Carl's here because I can pick on Weston now and say, well, BSO is their code officer. Are they going to have to do, right? Or no? No, they're no longer. Okay, they're not. So BSO, okay, all right. So I thought BSO was, but again, again, you're going to hire somebody that would have to do that position, and or how's that position going to be paid? And why am I, if I'm not part of the solid waste authority, why is the solid waste authority telling me what I should or should not do? But again, it still goes back to, it's not a recognized cost to the resident or the commercial business and a direct cost, but there is a direct cost because now the city's going to have to hire additional code officer, and your building planning and zoning might need somebody else as well. So just two things to think of.
Thank you. Move on.
Yeah, let's move.
Oh, I'm sorry, Mr. Thompson.
Sorry, good morning. Sorry for being late. Let me ask a stupid question. In term, everybody's asking about cost. Is there some provision in the cost that is going to be translated into the solid waste, whatever you call it, assessment, levy, and so forth, that is going to capture some of the costs that the cities have to, like, I mean, you can do it per capita or something, but there's some additional costs in terms of staffing, so forth and so forth. Or
Not at the municipal, not at the ILA member level. Yes, in terms of education and outreach, that will be captured in what has been sort of the build
has it been
of what the
discussed or even mentioned?
The administrative costs?
Yes, that will because of these, what the solid waste authority is trying to do, that will trickle down to the cities. I mean, has it ever been brought up? I mean, I'll admit that I'm not tracking this word for word, day to day, but those who eat, drink, and sleep this stuff, has there ever been a line item or a discussion about there has to be some kind of provision there? We may not know what it is, but apply a factor per size of the city. And, you know, over the years, you can adjust it up or down, or am I being too simple?
As I understand it, and I'll just jump in and please correct me if I get this wrong. As I understand it, the proposed municipal contribution, which then becomes a surtax on tonnage, which at some point will become an ad valorem levy, is based on the authority supplying and supporting the services that are outlined in the master plan. And unless I'm missing it, most of this piece is not really expanded on in the master plan.
Correct, because compliance of this legislation, the C&D legislation, that is not part of the assessment that or surcharge or ad valorem, non-ad valorem approach. That is housed within each municipality, and it's not a new conversation. It's been discussed extensively over the last 2 years in terms of where that cost is. You know, one of the challenges is that we are asked, what does it mean for our municipal budget? It's hard for us to get inside what the considerations are in terms of what your staffing levels are today. What are the responsibilities of current staff? But that's part of the reason that we've been meeting with, not just with elected officials, but also with administrative leadership from the ILA members, to make sure that it's understood that there are certain responsibilities that will be housed and funded through the authority, and others that will be the responsibility of each ILA member.
Okay, so essentially, that part of it will have to roll into each municipality's methodology of how they assess fees. Because I just give you an example. Western is the fee that the hauler charges us per resident times the franchise fee, and it's divided, and that's basically the cost to each property. So then these other components will basically have to roll into it. And, you know, you have the SWA fee that's on the tax roll, and then it won't be just a clean what it costs divided by what it costs for each property. Like in Western, the hauler gives a cost for each property. We don't go into the tonnage and all of that, right?
Yeah, so I would imagine, I mean, and we've asked for this information from each ILA member. Typically, there's 4 components of a solid waste assessment,
Mhm.
right? Collection, recycling, disposal, and administration. So I would imagine that each assessment as it's developed within the ILA members, they look at what is the contribution from other departments, right? So you're assigning FTEs to different cost centers, and some may go from public works or code compliance or building into the solid waste assessment. Well, contract compliance or program compliance is part of that administrative portion of an annual solid waste fee.
Okay, thank you.
Well, why don't we push ahead? There's 3 other elements that we just want to touch on in terms of framing the policy discussion. So Lisa, if you could advance to progressive enforcement. So again, while I asked you a moment ago to avert your eyes of the schedule, really for the dates, but in terms of activities, I don't think anybody would be advocating for going from no legislation and enforcement to legislation and enforcement on day one. There should be a compliance period, the education period, and that is simply what we're trying to capture here. Based on your experience implementing new legislation, what's an appropriate compliance period? Is it 3 months? Is it 6 months? Is it 9 months? Is it a year? Is it 2 years? And every community is different, right? So is your code enforcement or code compliance program, is the goal of that to achieve compliance, or is it to be punitive, or is it both? So these are policy decisions that will help us make recommendations on how long to focus on education before there's hard enforcement, and should it be we'll get to fees under a different topic, but should it be such a hit that folks will think twice, or as we've been talking about within the C&D ordinance, does that just become the cost of doing business? Right. I would like to think our goal is to engage the business community to do their part in managing the waste stream components that have value.
So I think generally most of us are going to all say that compliance is always the goal, but without any type of penalty, you'll never get full compliance.
Yeah.
Just our take, looking at what the county has done in their proposed, I'm sorry, just not close enough to it. Looking at what the county has proposed in their ordinance, I think it's right on target, 1 year basically before any fines actually start to head in. And then, the fines that they have outlined in their proposal, I think makes sense. So I would be supportive of what the county has put together.
Okay. And I'm just going to take the opportunity. We put it on county, we modeled the county ordinance language, but again, it's not just a county ordinance where it's contemplated as an ordinance that would be applicable in the county as the representative of unincorporated, but each ILA member. Mr. Thompson, new comment or old comment?
No comment.
Okay, well, your sign is up. Thanks. Okay. And then I would imagine within each ILA member, there is an administrative process if you want to appeal a fine. Is that a fair statement? So again, to answer the question, what is the additional cost of implementing this? The notion is that this would travel under existing operations, whether it's through the administrative hearings or contract oversight and compliance. And again, we know that the impact will be greater than zero, but we don't know to what extent it is, because each ILA member has different processes and different levels of staffing. So what we may ask in the future is to save us the job of hunting and pecking and going through Muni code for each ILA member. We may ask you for your administrative process for code matters, just so that we can then digest that and see if we can find the commonality amongst all. So again, we can give you something to react to rather than a clean sheet of paper.
If I may suggest, so in order to kind of standardize the process itself and maybe to expedite things, perhaps having a county-wide, magistrate process for this purpose might be good. Every city has their own special magistrate, but they're probably filled with legitimate. I shouldn't say legitimate. It gives a wrong connotation, but specific issues to the municipality, right? And so this is something that if it's countywide and we want them to follow a countywide standard, maybe the special magistrate process should be done countywide. There'd be economies of scale. You'd be able to keep the magistrate busy with specific items related to this and enforcing this process. So maybe we could just have one, countywide magistrate handle these hearing items or the violation items and the appeal process itself.
And it's a fair comment. We hear you. We can't make decisions on behalf of the county, and we're trying to get them. So I'm going to ask you to put yourselves in our position. We're trying to thread not one needle, but 29 needles. And there may be value in doing that, but we will simply present that as an idea and then solicit feedback. So we're trying to work closely with the county, both on the sort of the day-to-day operations, on the administrative side and the legal side. So we're not overstepping our bounds, but we are sort of analyzing and running to ground each of the suggestions that may be asking for more out of the county than out of any individual ILA member.
Yeah, understood. Just to present it to as an idea, because I think you'd have consistency in decisions and in standards, and with 29 different member cities, the decisions might be inconsistent, and how one city handles it is going to be different than how other cities handle it. So I just would like to be, I would like that to be presented as an idea.
Yeah, we keep looking for the easy button, but we haven't found it yet. Okay. Lisa, let's jump down to fees, and we touched on this earlier, right? So what is an amount that is meaningful in terms of assuring compliance? So we don't want it to become the cost of doing business, but there also has to be a rational nexus with any fee that is recommended. Okay. So again, that may be part of the data request. Also, what your administrative fines are, and I realize those are subject to change, but it's helpful to have a starting point.
So just a quick question. Those fees would be consistent throughout Broward County, regardless of where you are, and not different through each municipality.
Yeah, we recognize that 29 members are not all equal, but for consistency's sake, at least that's where we're starting. But we will raise that consideration with the policy body, the executive committee. We'll run it through the committee, the subcommittee that was tasked with focusing on this in the C&D ordinance. But we're going to bring these ideas forward because we want to be in a sense that the conduit between the technical resources, other stakeholders, and just share all that without too much commentary. But rather, this is the feedback for consideration, and they may very well ask us for our opinion, but we want to present it as the information is given. Okay. Got 2 more slides, maybe a few more. We're going to try to skip the schedule again. But as I mentioned, we want to make sure that there is a carrot that balances the stick. So what we've seen be effective in other communities is recognition, but we also know that if we're not driving towards a specific metric, whether it's compliance, and we know that tonnage will follow compliance, or tonnage will follow participation. We want to have metrics so that we can measure what success looks like. We don't know what those metrics should be at this point, but we just want to set the intention that there will be performance metrics associated with this, so that we can communicate progress made, not just within the authority, but also to the greater community. Okay, next slide, please. So this sort of hits on the point that Ms. Morris shared. What can be expected from the authority? And again, the authority at this point is the centralized hub for the education and outreach and support throughout the sort of the execution, the administration of the master plan. Next slide, please. Okay, don't look at the dates. Look at the elements. We still think that these are the right elements. We're going to be playing with the durations, but again, we're trying to meet the executive committee in their direction to us, which is keep this moving as quickly as possible. We realize that there is a lot of activity now. We know that y'all are particularly busy. I'm sure you're all neck deep in budgeting and hopefully winding down budgeting for next year. We know that the elected officials many of them are going to be on summer break, which creates other challenges where matters will stack up before summer break and then they'll be waiting for them after summer break. But we do want to drive this forward, and we know that we will know for certain whether the authority survives by the middle of August. But again, the intention is that this is a best practice to extract value from the waste stream, particularly in this case, the commercial waste stream, so that we can move the needle on resource recovery for the authority. Next slide, please. So again, we provided you with a fact sheet. So if within, attached to the fact sheet is rather brief, I think 3 or 4 pages, but there is the legislation from the example communities that is provided as a resource. It is light reading for anybody that loves to read ordinances. But if you want to see the backup, right, what we drew upon in our recommendations, that's where you can find it. The draft ordinance, we welcome your feedback, and we appreciate your feedback today, but this is not the end of our ask for your feedback. And to the point that was raised, as now that we have greater definition around sort of the world that you're living in, we can start to frame out what the administrative process is. And again, if the authority survives, then we will be working on the education and outreach materials. That's what we have for you today. So we've taken notes. We've heard what you've shared today. We will assimilate that, but we welcome your feedback beyond just the meeting today, and we'll be back before you really at every step, just to provide a briefing of where we are and the delivery of these services. So thank you. It's not necessarily a presentation, it's a status update.
Yeah, Travis, can you please come up and do a update on the C&D recycling?
Hey, good morning, everyone. So again, Travis Barnes, a part of the SCS project team with Resource Recycling Systems. Just to give a quick update, tomorrow we do have the roundtable discussion scheduled here in this room at 8:30. We've invited a variety of folks from the industry, not only the waste processors, but Building Coalition and several other groups like that, to try to get a diverse stakeholder input on how the draft C&D ordinance might implementation might impact them, get their feedback on that. A couple points of clarification. The last TAC meeting, I did misspeak on one item in particular. We got clarity from the county in regards to the monthly reports that the county requires the waste processors to submit to them. So if you're a MRF within the county, you do have to report to the State Department of Environmental Protection, but there's also a monthly report that they submit to Broward County that they track the amount of tons coming into each facility, certain types of materials and where those materials flow. And that information is available on the website that they have. They're not really enforcing any minimum recycling requirements or anything with that, but there is a mechanism there with existing reporting that we might be able to leverage to use to implement C&D ordinance, and something that we're working with the county on. So I wanted to correct that. Also wanted to state from Member Morris and others, we understand the implementation concerns and that there's got to be with any ordinance proper due diligence done in terms of how each city would need to implement it, what's the impact on staffing requirements, also the internal education that has to take place to make sure people know what they're doing, when it would start, and all of that. I think where we're at with it is with any ordinance, some of those same questions would occur. And we have to have a little bit more consensus on what should be in the ordinance before we can get into then how it would be implemented. But just know we understand fully your concerns on that. And as a former, county government practitioner, I fully get what the needs are with that. So we work and provide clarity once we get more consensus on what should be in the ordinance. Other feedback since the last TAC in further discussions with Broward County is that they feel there might need to be some additional exemptions from the C&D ordinance in regards to the types of projects that the ordinance triggers compliance with. So potentially having some more exemptions for smaller projects or smaller mom and pop haulers that don't do a lot of tons. They feel that there might need to be some additional exceptions, and we'll be working through getting more feedback tomorrow to figure out what that looks like. But that's just some of the feedback that we've received since the last TAC meeting. And then I'll also say we do have any comments from you all. We welcome continued engagement on that. I think we've received comments from about 10 municipalities thus far. So there's a lot of folks that we haven't heard from. If there are specific issues you've got with the ordinance, we welcome that feedback and get it to Sam or myself, and we're tracking all of that to make sure that we're documenting everything and that we're considering all of that with how we develop the ordinance. So beyond that, that's kind of a quick update. We'll be here tomorrow to get a lot more feedback from folks, but I'm available for any questions you might have.
Travis, a quick question. So thank you for the update, first of all, and we appreciate that you've started engaging with the county, and that was a suggestion of this group at the last meeting. You said you've already received some feedback. Have you received all the county comments at this point, and now you're going to be revising the ordinance, or is there still ongoing conversations with the county at this point?
Yeah, there'll be ongoing conversations. I would frame it as that we're just starting to get more directly involved with the county, specifically on the C&D ordinance. There's been a lot of focus previously on all elements of the master plan, facilities amendment, those types of things. So we'll be getting more direct engagement with the county, and they've been very helpful in that.
Will there be interim drafts, or are you going to wait until you get through all the county issues and resend?
We'll get feedback from everyone tomorrow as well, and then we'll be taking that into consideration. I anticipate we'll have a revised draft that we send back out to start the iterative process and continue to improve upon it.
And when do you anticipate that revised draft to come out?
We hope to turn that around pretty quickly. Again, we understand the timeline the executive committee's put us on. We also have heard everyone's feedback that might be a little bit unrealistic, but we're going to try to push it forward as fast as we can. So it depends on how much feedback we get. I don't want to throw out a date that we can't adhere to, but my goal would be to turn something around very quickly so that we can keep the process going.
Okay. Thank you. Anyone else?
All right. Thank you.
Before we adjourn, I do want to just highlight, I know we talked in the beginning today with the master plan update. I do want to remind everybody that we sent out for the facilities amendment a draft ordinance for everyone to utilize as a base. So make resolution. Thank you, Lori. Draft resolution. So if you haven't received that or you can't find it, let me know. I'm happy to resend that out to you guys. But I know that was sent out. I know that's very helpful for us as we work through our city attorney's office. So just one last comment.
No, my understanding is that what has been drafted is what has been sent to anybody that has requested it. It's also, and just a shameless plug for the Broward SWA website. All of this information is posted there, mostly in real time. So whether it is as part of the meeting minutes or the meeting agenda packages, all of that information is there. All the work that we've been doing on the mandatory commercial recycling and the C&D initiatives, all of that information is on the Broward SWA site.
There's no more questions, I think, then we'll call the meeting to adjourn, and meeting will be adjourned.
Next meeting is May 10th from 9 to 11. May 11th, excuse me, May 11th.